Greetings and salutations. Welcome to another edition of the Friday FARcast. I am Robert Phoenix. It always warms the cockles of my heart when I hear that round of applause. As synthetic as it may be, somewhere out there, I know somebody's listening. And they're happy to be listening for this experience so we can share this time together. And the together part is a really interesting equation because we're these, and I've talked about this before, these little islands. We're like little archipelagos separated by bodies of virtual sea, even though we may not be that far away. Some of you might be listening to me in parts of Texas that are not that far from my house. Just a ride up the asphalt stream to where you or I might be. Others in this little archipelago might be way across the other side of the straits there, listening in your own environment, checking in and doing our best to hang together under really, at times, stressful conditions, but also interesting times. How is everybody out there? Trump has made his way to Poland amidst a hero's welcome. And we're going to talk about Agenda 21 and 2030 today. So if you're here to hear that conversation, and I encourage you to come into the chat room today, and if you've got questions about Agenda 2030, Agenda 21, this is the one thing I miss about Blog Talk Radio. Blog Talk Radio was kind of a crappy service, but people could call in. It's the one thing that Spreaker is missing. If they could add one tiny little addition. Now, they do have Skype. And I could try to open the Skype line today. Shall we try that? Let's see what happens. No, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to interrupt the momentum here. And they get all bogged down into, what's going on with the audio? I'll try it out next week. So Trump is in Poland, arrived with a hero's welcome. By the way, did you notice how the wife of the president of Poland kind of looks like Hillary Clinton? She's like a better-looking version of Hillary Clinton. It was kind of odd in some ways. It was almost like Trump and Hillary back together again. What a couple that was. I mean, think of the karma that those two must have to have enacted that thing out in front of us, day in and day out and day in and day out for, what, about 6 months? I mean, it was the best reality show on TV. It was better than the Kardashians, and the Kardashians sucks, but you know what I'm saying, right? Housewives, fill in the blank. I mean, the Trump and Hillary reality circus was mesmerizing. I mean, we had multiple Hillarys, we had coughing Hillarys, we had dying Hillarys. You know, we had Trump going off on anybody within about a 6-foot radius. I mean, it was kind of amazing to watch. I mean, you had to look the other way at times, but you also couldn't look away. It was that compelling, that bad, and that good, all simultaneously. I guarantee you the next election cycle, unless it's Hillary and Trump again, wouldn't that be amazing? Although I don't think it's going to happen. I'd be very surprised if Donald Trump makes it out of the the eclipse this year. I mean, it doesn't look good. I mean, one thing's going to happen. One of three things are going to happen. Either something's going to happen to Trump, and I'm thinking Leo, eclipse, ascendant, sun, heart issues. Heart issues. Now, remember, he is the figurehead for the United States, whether you like it or not, whether you believe that there's a shadow government behind him, or behind any president for that matter. He is sitting at the pinnacle of the visible pyramid. Now, there may be an invisible pyramid, but he's at the top of the visible pyramid. And one of the things that... one second here. I'm not sure I got this right. This. One of the things... There we go. How's that? Is that better? Let me do this again. Here we go. One of the things that... If you go back to Confucianism, the whole idea behind Confucianism is that if the person at the top of the pyramid, who is the emperor or the king or the ruler, if that person is living with what Confucius would classify living within the will of heaven, then the will of heaven would be bestowed upon the leader of that province, of that city, of that country, because that is the nature of Confucius' system, and that there were a number of kind of moral bullet points to be met. And if you met those bullet points, if you lived and ruled literally from an upright moral position, you could do no wrong. You would be endowed and one with the will of heaven. Now, in order to do that, most leaders have to live a fairly scrupulous life, which is almost impossible. And that's why Confucius spent so much time kind of on the run during his day, because he was a really unpopular philosopher and aide. Most rulers just want to hear what they want to hear or need to hear. They just want to be flattered. Famous story, when Confucius was kind of in the countryside looking for a new place to land with his students, he ran across Lao Tse, and this is an absolutely true story. They were contemporaries. And Lao Tse said, "You're a great man. You're a great man. You have a great mind. But you will always alienate people because of your absolute truths." And if you look at what Lao Tse would talk about, Lao Tse was not into the concept of the absolute truth, but was into this more abstract philosophy of the Tao and the uncarved block and returning to a sense of innocence. There's really not a lot of finger pointing in Taoism. And in the system, in Confucius' system, there kind of is. But if we take Confucius' system, which I think is applicable, and you look at who's on top, right? I mean, it's really simple. When you don't even have to go to the presidency. If you're looking at, say, a baseball team, and I know this for a fact because I manage baseball. I've managed about 5 teams. And first of all, the teams take on the persona of their coach or their manager. And this is nothing new. You can go into almost any sports website and you do a little bit of a inner site Google search, and you'll find exactly what I'm talking about. Teams take on the persona of their coaches. It's just this trickle-down effect. And I saw it when I coached and managed, and when I was on, the team was on. That was not a problem. The team was on. And when I was off, the team was off. Plain and simple. It was right there for me to see. And I had at least half a dozen of those moments where I was off, and and some of those games we won, and the majority of them we lost. But when I was on, there was a really good chance we were going to win. And that's just the way it is. Things trickle down. If you have a company and a culture, it starts with the person at the top. And I get that synergy is important. But if you don't have the right people, then your company's not going to work. That's essential. But who sets the tone for that? Who hires the people? who has the sort of the overall philosophical framework. I'll give you a case in point. Back in the 1980s and 1990s, one of the most successful computer companies was Compaq, right here down the road in Houston. And Rod Cannon was the head of Compaq. And Rod Cannon had a great managerial style, very informal, yet he was also somebody who expected results, and he worked his ass off. He was a Capricorn. And he allowed people to be informal. And they started, in many ways, what was the beginning. Like, a lot of people think that Hewlett-Packard started all these perks that went along with working. There's some truth to that. But Compaq and Rod Cannon brought it down to a much more grassroots level. And they used to bring donuts, and they used to bring sodas in. And the next thing you know, they've got these perks set up for their workers. And their workforce was incredibly diverse. They loved what they did, and they were amazingly productive and successful. And how did that all flowed down from the top, from Rod Cannon? Not perfect. Nobody's perfect. But we can see this even with Steve Jobs, right? Jobs was mercurial. He was mercurial. He was demanding. At times, he would have these fits of excellence. And if you look at his run at Apple, that's exactly what Apple was like. Apple had some serious missteps. But every now and then, they'd hit one out of the park because of some aggregation of genius and prescience. Steve Jobs left Apple to create Next. And, Next was the precursor of mobile computing. He was ahead of his time. But Apple, succeeded in fits and starts because that's who Steve Jobs was. Fits and starts. And finally, when he came back, it was like the curve had caught up with Steve, and he was able to implement a lot of the design ideas he'd been working on for a long time. And I don't think he was any less demanding than he was when he was a young tyrant, enfant terrible. But the culture had ultimately acclimated to him and had the right people in place. Look, I know people that worked on iTunes. I know people that worked on the iPhone. And I know people that worked on some of the other Apple pieces that helped them kind of relaunch their brand. And they were on call 24/7, all the time. Anyway, I'm getting a little far afield here, but I'm trying to give you an understanding about what happens at the top of this pyramid. Now, I've been working on this post on the Pope for a while because the Pope is obviously the head of the Catholic Church, which is rapidly degenerating into a cesspool of child trafficking and man-loving whores, which is unfortunate. And most of the major religions have this going on. Okay, Catholic Church, I'm not making any excuses, in the crosshairs right now for a lot of really more than indulgent behavior, depraved behavior. But you could go right into Tibetan Buddhism, and there are horror stories of the boys in the monasteries who were raped, abused, turned into monks. I mean, you could right there, bang, right. If you go into Islam, you'll find examples in Islam where homosexuality with boys is. Look, in Islam, you cannot have sex theoretically with a woman, right? I mean, it's got to be the virgin story. You've got to be able to negotiate these family weddings. I mean, there's a lot of social religious protocols. So how do you think men have sex before they get married? They have sex with young men. Dirty little secret. Dirty little secret. And what about when young men get circumcised? right? Well, in the Jewish faith, they have a rabbi or a moil, and they'll suck the blood off the penis. I mean, can you see where it's this whole thing around kids? It's everywhere, right? It's everywhere. But what we don't look at, what we look at is what we're being told to look at. Right now it's the Catholic Church. They don't get a pass. Trust me. But I was talking about, I'm trying to work on this piece with the Pope, and the Pope happens to be a Sagittarius. And the sun right now is in Saturn. It's right on the Pope's sun. And so what's happening now is we're getting this gravity, this intense push. And the push goes both ways, right? It's coming from the Pope into Saturn, and the Pope is saying, hey, look, we need a world government to take care of our problems. That's the Pope sidling up to Saturn. Saturn comes in and is hitting the Pope, and it's like, look, Saturn and Sagittarius, there is some real hypocrisy going on here, and we're going to get to the bottom of the truth in the church, and this Pope, theoretically, will be the vehicle towards that end. Now, you remember the number 3 man in the church, the Pope's right-hand man, George Pell, is under some real heat for child trafficking. Kids. Heat. Seriously, he goes back to Australia, a very good chance he'll get arrested and go to jail. Just the other day, they had to break up an orgy. The Vatican police had to break up an orgy with these members of the church who were high on coke and doing each other. Can you imagine walking in on that? My God. But anyway, these are all fractals of the end times in some ways. They really are. But what we're looking at, though, is Saturn's impact on the Pope and his son, right? And how it permeates down through the church. What's going to happen? Now, the same thing could be said, the same example can be used for Donald Trump, who is a Leo rising, and we talked about this a little bit, and have been talking about this for a while with the Great American Eclipse, with the sun eclipsed. If I was Trump, I would just go, I would put myself right in the center of that damn eclipse. That's what I would do. I wouldn't run from it. I wouldn't be outside the United States, although he might. I mean, there are astrologers who would tell him to get out of Dodge. There's some validity to that. But I don't know. He's Trump. Just go right into the heart of that eclipse, man. Let's take it on. Something's going to change. Something is going to change. Something is going to happen after this eclipse, or even about a week and a half to before or after. And it's going to have to do with Trump. It's just the way it is. And since he is, what do they call the president? The father of the country. He's the father of the country, whether you like it or not. It was okay when Obama was father of the country, right? Or it was okay when, I don't know, Chester Arthur was the father of the country. Or it was okay when Calvin Coolidge was. I don't know, I wasn't there. But this is the Capricornian, Saturnian role of the father. And the first lady is the mother. Now again, it is probably a little puerish, a little childish to put so much faith in one person, but most people haven't resolved their parental issues anyway. I mean, we can see this with the Antifa and the social justice warriors. They basically hate Trump. It's a father issue. It's a total father issue. It's the father that wasn't there. Right now, you got to deal with him. Daddy's home now. He's come back home. Where were you before? You left us, and you're a creep. Of course, Obama was the cool guy. Obama was the cool guy that Mom had over Dated for a while. Had him over for a few weekends. Uncle Barry. It's your Uncle Barry. Oh, hi, Uncle Barry. Oh, thank you. Uncle Barry always brings me candy. Uncle Barry always brings me this thing that actually is supposed to be really good for me, and it actually tastes good too. I love that about him. Then Uncle Barry leaves. Uncle Barry leaves. And then there's the vacuum, there's the void, and eventually he comes back. There he is. That son of a bitch who left us. Anyway, so he's over in Russia. I'm sorry, Poland. He just met with Putin today. Couldn't hear a damn word either of them were saying, because the cameras were going off like machine guns. The click of the shutter was like a clip being emptied. Each image extracted, taking away milliseconds of their life. Anyway, that's what was going on. We'll see what happens. It's, this whole Russia thing is totally fascinating. I was listening to this video that Henrik did over at Red Ice, and it was with Christopher John Bjerknes. And Bjerknes has a very interesting view of Putin, and I highly recommend you watch it, because it's fascinating, and it challenges perceptions about who we believe our culture heroes to be, and that Putin is the great white hope, and that Russia is the only thing saving the world from complete and utter shambles and the unholy reign of the social Marxists. And there may be some truth to that, but I recommend that you watch this Bjerknes video with Henrik. You can find it on YouTube. It's one of the more recent additions to Red Ice Radio. And you know what? I got to hand it to Henrik. Even though he stiffed me one time by not coming on the show, I think Henrik thought that I was too diverse. It's like, oh, he's too diverse. This is the way it always is with me. I'm too diverse from one side. And on the diverse side, oh, he's a closet racist or, closet fascist. You can't win, right? You just can't win. Or on the conservative side, oh man, he's a crazy new age occult guy. He's into witchcraft magic. No. And then on that side, it's like, man, what is this guy talking about? And he's regressive. He's a Cro-Magnon. Sometimes it's hard being me. But that's okay, because our little archipelagos are connected by streams of thoughts. And sometimes you may not always agree with my stream, and that's okay. Just let it go past you. There'll be more clear water that you can partake of as the flotsam and jetsam of the occasional errant thoughts trickles on by. Something's going to happen with Trump. Something's going to happen with America as part of this eclipse. Will he have a heart attack? Will we go to war? Will he do a complete about-face on who he is? Will he upturn the apple cart, so to speak, just to watch the apples tumble? It remains to be seen. But something is going to go down, and it will affect us. Trust me, that is the nature of how power and dynamics in the Saturn Cube world work. I was watching this cute little movie last night, which I have seen before, a couple times before. It's called Chef. It's on Netflix. It's one of these little gems of a movie. And Jon Favreau, there are so many interesting parallels with this movie in my life, especially the first time I saw it. Now the parallels are they're in the distance. But when I saw it, it was ripe. My kid was around 12 at the time, maybe 11. I think he was 11. And I had this old silver Mercedes, 1970 diesel, silver exterior, blue leather interior. And, of course, at the time, divorced, and I wasn't a cook, but I was doing my astrology trip. Still am, believe it or not. Hello, I'm open for business. That's right, I'm open for business. Anyway. And the Favreau character, like, he comes off a lot like me during this movie. And there were just so many strange parallels with the film, from the car to the kid. It's a charming movie. Charming movie. But I was watching it from an astrological perspective last night. These things creep in every now and then. And there's a scene at the beginning of the movie where he's, and I'm not going to blow it for you if you haven't seen it, he's a chef at a restaurant in Los Angeles. He loves cooking. Loves it. And there's going to be a food critic coming in that night, blogger, who's played by the late Oliver Platt. Love that guy. Anyway. The owner of the restaurant, played by Dustin Hoffman, comes sauntering in. And basically says, I have ideas. I have ideas about tonight's menu. And Jon Favreau's character, the chef, wants to create something interesting, unique, creative. He wants to challenge the customers and yet create a delicious meal. And Dustin Hoffman and Jon Favreau get into a conflict. And Hoffman basically says, hey, it is my restaurant, and you work for me, and you're going to make what I tell you to, because at the end of the day, I can always find another chef. Really comes down to that. And Favreau is so into the feeding and the family. When I'm talking about his family, I'm talking about the restaurant family. And his co-workers, and his sous chef, prep cooks. John Leguizamo is in it. He's great. So what we have is we have this distillation and breakdown between Capricorn and Cancer. Capricorn being the Dustin Hoffman character who owns the restaurant, runs it. He's at the top of the pyramid. And then you have the Jon Favreau character who's a little bit down the pyramid, kind of an important place, and they clash. And the Cancerian position is over food, and it's over creativity, and feeling, and nuance, and loyalty, and all these things. And they all clash in that moment, and guess who wins? Capricorn. Dustin Hoffman. That's all I'm going to say. But it's a good movie. Check it out. And we're headed into the Capricorn moon tonight, which is one of the reasons why I'm sharing it with you. Not the best moon. Austere. But I know people who have Capricorn moons, and later in life, as they get older, their emotions are coming on. And they're having fun. While the rest of the zodiac is lurching towards Babylon. All right. We're going to get into Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. This is the meat of the show. The meat of the show. So one of the things that I did, and I'm going to talk a little bit about astrology, is I looked up. You have to go back in time. You've got to go back to 1992. And you have to look at the Rio Summit, which was a 10-day summit, roughly from June 4th to June 14th, Rio de Janeiro, 1992, where the Agenda 21/Agenda 2030 genesis took place. So I decided to just look at the ephemeris. And now the final day was the 14th, and that's when the accord was signed. It was on a Sunday, believe it or not, the 14th. So, the What do we have? We've got June 14th, duality. Duality, of course. Of course, George Bush was president at the time. Gemini, right? Maybe this was the cloned version of Bush, perhaps. But nonetheless, the reflection of Gemini. So we have dual world, duality world. And this is really what Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 is, right? We are living in what we think is our version of reality, which is we live in a suburb, we get up, we get cars, we drive to a job, we fight traffic, we come home. We have all of these versions of that reality. Some people live in cities, some people live in the country, but this is our world. You have a choice to live wherever you want, if you can afford it. In reality, there's another world that's being created beneath it. Do you understand this? This is from the astrological mechanics of when Agenda 21 was signed. It's Gemini world. Two worlds at once. Okay, we have that straight, right? Now, what's interesting is that on that Sunday, like they could have signed it on Saturday, maybe they could have signed it on Friday. Why did they wait till Sunday, 14th? Because the moon is in Sagittarius. Full moon. Full moon. Sagittarius is not just local, that's Gemini. Sagittarius is the world. Right? It is the expanse of the world. It is philosophical. It is religious. Embedded inside of Agenda 21 are both philosophical and religious planks that this new order of living are built on. And it connects with countries, Sagittarius, all over the world. Now, if you look at the individual planets, they're fascinating. The personal planets. Where's Mercury? Mercury's in Cancer. It's at 8 degrees. So when we talk about Agenda 21, or even the ideas that are put forward in Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, they're going to be, to some degree, Cancerian. Sustainability. When we think about sustainability, let's think about you have a family, you have children, your children have children. Sustainability is the idea that those generations will be sustained over time and that your progeny will be carried forward. But there's a different kind of sustainability that's being talked about through Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. Sustainability. How can we sustain our environment? How can we talk? And see, the thing about this is, right, if you look at how Agenda 21 is shared, it is shared by these bioregional groups. I was talking, a couple shows ago, I was talking about SCAG. And the SCAG is essentially this kind of leadership group which is comprised of mayors and city council people from different areas in Southern California. And so they have this, and they have a lot of money, so SCAG is like this supergroup of people from all these different areas that meet together. They go to Washington, they go to Sacramento, they get their marching orders, and it's about creating a bioregion. The way that the information is communicated is very Cancerian, because they talk about things like sustainability and future generations, and the millennials, and they want this, and they want that, and let's ride bikes. What they're doing is they're transposing these ideas about home and nurturing and emotions, and they're injecting really what is going to be a sterile prison-like model with emotional content. That's what's taking place. Mercury and Cancer. And if you watch any of these videos, it's fascinating. these people who are trained in the Adelphi process come in, they split groups up, and everything's about consensus, and they don't move. Basically, they move people towards their consensus goal. They just guide them like sheep. Now, people have started to get... People are smart, man. They've gotten hip to this. They come in, they kind of break this up a little bit. They've got to reconvene. They've got to come at this another way. But if you watch some of these videos, what these presenters, or what they're called facilitators, will do is they will say the following. We're not here to tell you what to do. We're here to understand your vision. We're here to listen and to help you implement your vision. That is so Mercury and Cancer. We're here to listen. And we're here to implement your version of your town, or your city, or your unincorporated area. And they'll go along that path and they'll listen and oh yeah, it's this and this and this and this. And then they'll draw up final docs. And in those final docs, that fluid, Cancerian kind of way of listening, looking at things, all of a sudden becomes ironclad. Capricorn kicks in. These are the rules. Yeah, I know. They're a little more static and fixed than we agreed upon. They're a little more final, but you know what? You got a lot of what you wanted, and we took the best of that, and we added a few things of our own. That's Mercury and Cancer. That's how it works. This is how it works in Agenda 21 land. All right. Where are we now? We're looking at Venus and Gemini. Hello? Venus and Gemini. I'm sorry, what was Venus again? Yes, it's in Gemini. I just wanted to make sure. Yep. Guess what? Exact. Venus, okay, so we have the Sun at 23, 23:11, and Venus at 23:12. Sun, Venus conjunction in Gemini. How about that? Sun, Venus conjunction. That's interesting. So the moon is our living structures, right? Our emotional structures, how we live at times. What kind of place we come from emotionally. Venus is very much related to aesthetics. And it is another kind of appendage of living and living structures, just like the moon is. And here in Gemini, of course, there's going to be two ways of doing things. Conjunct the Sun, it again basically creates a stronger polarization and stronger mirror for these two worlds that are operating sort of simultaneously. And while Gemini isn't necessarily duplicitous, if you've got two separate messages or two separate tracks of reality kind of running at times counter to each other, if somebody's more invested in one of those versions, they'll say or do whatever they need to do in order to empower, reinforce, and support their version, and thus detract from the other. So the Sun-Venus conjunction in Gemini. It's interesting. It's all local too, right? Gemini represents the local hand of everything. Mars is in Aries at 29 degrees. This is a fascinating aspect because at 29 degrees, the energy's almost gone out of Mars. It's in its own sign, but there's nothing there really, right? There's nothing there. It's at the end of Aries. So it's the individual, correct? It's the expression of the individual, but there's nothing left. The next day, the 15th, Mars is at 0 Taurus. So we're dealing with the sort of this energy around new physical structures in Taurus. Now, did they map this out? I mean, what happens if they go back to, like, say, the 4th of June? So let's just sign this thing right now and get it over with. Mars is at 22 degrees Aries. That's the master number. And it's in third decan, Sagittarius, so people could be self-righteous, indignant, use lawyers, law, whatever. But at 29 degrees, the energy is just about done. So what kind of threat would the individual pose with Mars at 29 degrees Aries? Question mark. Not much. Jupiter's in Virgo. It expands, Jupiter, the way that we're supposed to be doing things. And in Virgo, it's not the best place. Oh yeah, we'll live lighter, we'll live with less. Not a problem. Yeah, bring it along. Create a philosophy. Jupiter ruler of Sagittarius, Sagittarius philosophy and systems. Of Virgo, which is simplicity, right? Nothing wrong with that. But again, it's part of the philosophical rubric of how Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, and there's more to it. We're going to get into some of that, how it is created. Here's Saturn now. Saturn, Aquarius. Saturn in Aquarius. It's retrograde too. That's interesting. Saturn is the lock and the key. Saturn is the seal. Saturn is the cube-like structure in which we find ourselves dwelling in many cases. Right? It is the hypercube. And in Aquarius rules what? The New Age. Right? The New Age. This is the structure of the New Age. Right there, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, it's retrograde. Now, it could mean that this will not work. It's the first retrograde planet we've run into. You'll also see here that Uranus and Neptune and Pluto are all retrograde. So from Saturn out, everything is retrograde. Currently, transiting Pluto is right on natal Neptune for Agenda 21. It's right there. It's an interesting time. Very interesting. You know what Trump did? Well, first of all, Trump pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord. That is a significant blow, by the way. Even though the states, Jerry Brown's going to have his own climate summit, whatever. But nonetheless, I mean, that was significant. He's also pulled funding from these 3 regional development areas, which are connected to SCAG. Every region has their little regional development, and it's all about sustainability and the interface between the local communities and the government. One is the Appalachian resources something. And Trump has kept funding to these groups. So some of these kind of front NGOs, even though they're here in this country, are being defunded. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. If they want this Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 thing to pass and to have everybody living in stacking and packing, they're going to have to get Donald Trump out of the way. Now, maybe Trump's got some skin in the game and he's doing developing on the side. I don't know. That might come out. But Saturn and Aquarius, these are the Aquarian structures that were cemented, really, in that agreement. In retrograde, perhaps the retrograde piece is indicative of it not working, but also perhaps the retrograde piece is indicative of things being taken away from us in order to be truncated and put into these Saturnian boxes, so to speak. Now, this happened really pretty early on in the Millennial Watch, 1992. The Millennials, well, it's 21 degrees Scorpio. So 4 years after that, Pluto would go into Sagittarius. So we're in third decan. But this does kind of comprise the millennial energy with the aspects of the the Neptune-Uranus conjunction and Pluto and Scorpio. So would millennials, because most of them were born under these aspects, would they resonate with the social model of Agenda 21, Agenda 2030? Quite possibly. Clearly, they use them whenever they talk about it at a town meeting. Oh, millennials don't like this, they don't like this, but they do like this. By the way, one of the things that always comes up around this stuff is what they're doing to cities and parking inside of cities. Like, I hate going to downtown Austin now. It used to be pretty cool, but I don't like it anymore. You know what I do now when I go to downtown Austin? I drive my truck, I throw my bike in the back of the truck, and I ride my bike around downtown Austin. How well am I being trained? Because parking is a pain in the ass. Costs a lot of money, and they make the parking signs utterly confusing. Have you noticed that? They make them just completely confusing. You can park here, but you can't park here, and the arrows are going in strange directions, and they've got times, and it's a pain in the ass to decipher it, to park, to have to go back. So then you take your car, you go into a garage, and you're paying $10 instead of maybe $3 to park. $10 if you're lucky. It's probably more like $20. And this is happening in cities all across America. And the reason why is they don't want people driving around downtown areas. They want to eliminate cars. And some of you say, well, that's a great idea. Good, I'm all for it. Yeah, great, I'm all for it. But that's not where it's going to end. Trust me, it's not where it's going to end. The true node here for the Agenda 21 sign-off dates is at 0 Capricorn. That's a powerful, powerful, powerful true node. 0 Capricorn. Now, it was retrograde. I don't think much of it in the sense of the true node. But what's the south node? The south node is Cancer, right? It's Cancer. Now, is it in conjunction with the expression of Mercury in Cancer? Absolutely. It's a wide conjunction. So if we put those two together, what they're selling you is a false version of this Cancerian, feel-good, organic, green, sustainable world, when in actuality the dominant factor, the dominant force, is that true node in Capricorn at 0 degrees. That's on top. Let's think about the scene from the movie I shared with you last night. Dustin Hoffman, Jon Favreau. Who wins? Dustin Hoffman. Of course, Jon Favreau goes off to start a food truck, which is very Cancerian, with a little bit of Gemini thrown in because it's on wheels. And there's your cocktail. The dark moon is in Aquarius. Dark moon Lilith, Aquarius. 16 degrees. Conjunct Saturn in Aquarius at 18 degrees. It is the dark side of the Aquarian age. This is it. If you wanted the Rosetta Stone, this is it. Black moon Lilith Aquarius, conjunct Saturn in Aquarius, retrograde, the signing of the real accord. It's right there. It's right there. Selling you something that resembles a comfortable future. And really, all it is a prison of convenience. A long time ago, I was living in San Francisco, and I had this dream. Some people, I used to be just an extremely vivid dreamer. A lot of my dreams were not, there was a period of time when I had Pluto going through my 12th house in Scorpio. Man, most of my dreams were intense. Very intense. A lot of death, a lot of intensity, a lot of sex, just crazy Scorpionic dreams. But every now and then, I would have these dreams that just punch me through to some other reality, right? And I had this dream where I was I was in the future. And I swear, I was in the Agenda 21 future. And I'm in a field, there's nothing around, and then there's a city in the distance. But there's no suburbs, there's no highways, it's just the city, right? It's like this walled-off fortress in some ways. And I'm greeted by this young woman. I've told this story before, but it's works for today. And I look at her, and she looks at me, and I could feel something in the air. It was the most evil feeling, and yet everything looked great. But it felt just incredibly evil. And I said to her, what's going on here? She said, what do you mean? I said, something's not right. Something's very wrong here. And she looked at me and she says, well, there's nothing wrong. We have everything we need. We have plenty of food. People are healthy. And we're happy. I said, no, something's definitely wrong. And then she looked at me and she said, you're not from here. You're not from here. She ran off to the city to go tell the people that she had met an outsider. And to me, it felt like at that time, and we're talking about 1988, that I had somehow moved into the future where I was occupying a reality and a timeline that had become this version of Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. That's what it felt like. If you go to my Facebook page, you'll see that I have put up a map there. And it is the mega regions map, which is pretty interesting. Let me pull it up on my computer here. The emerging mega regions, these are the regions that, and I've gone over this before, but let's go over it again. These are the regions that they foresee where we'll all be living. Okay? We'll start at the Pacific Northwest. There's Cascadia. There's a lot of Pisces Vesica going on here. And there's some connection with Vancouver. It looks like Vancouver might even be part of this mega region. So there are circles within circles. That's the Pisces Vesica piece. And there's one enormous circle, which is this Cascadia region. And inside that circle, you've got places like, looks like Portland. Is that Portland? Yeah. And then Tacoma. And that big giant circle is Seattle. And looks like it may reach as far as Tacoma or Olympia. And then you've got a few other circles that kind of drop down into southern Oregon. We're looking at probably Eugene, and then Ashland, and probably Medford. And then out to the west, there's another little circle, which is likely Spokane. And then there's not a whole lot of anything else. You've got to go down to the Northern California mega region with a giant circle for the Bay Area, and then another circle for Sacramento, which, like a Pisces Vesica links up with it. And then you see the other circles that are connected to the Central Valley. And then you go down to Southern California, and you've got the huge mega region, LA, and then you've got the other mega regions from San Diego, circles within circles. And then you've got, which looks like another mega region, which is Las Vegas. Now, not a whole lot else. I think Reno might be a mega region, or part of the mega region. And then you have the Arizona Sun Corridor, which basically is a strip that runs from Flagstaff all the way down to Tucson. That's it. That's it, boys and girls. Then you have the Front Range, which is Denver, Boulder, and that goes kind of all the way down to what looks like probably Santa Fe, and then you have your little southern regions down there, sort of close to the border, but that's not part of the mega region, the Front Range. Between the Front Range and Northern California, there's nothing. Then you have the Texas Triangle. Now, this is fascinating because my son learned about this in school. And they're teaching them about the mega cities that are coming. And it starts with a huge circle in Dallas, a huge circle in Houston, and two smaller circles for Austin and San Antonio, which create this pyramid, and with some other lesser circles in between, probably Fort Worth, and looks like another circle might even be like Katy, just outside of Houston. And then you've got, looks like another part of the mega region, which is in Oklahoma, which is connected to the Texas Triangle. Then there's the Gulf Coast region, and that goes from sort of the Gulf of Texas, Corpus Christi, and that area, Harlingen, and it just hugs the coast. Houston kind of intersects both the Texas Triangle and the Gulf Coast. And then all these little nodes along the way along the Gulf Coast, which is part of that mega region. Then you have the Florida mega region. Of course, the largest part of the Florida mega region is Miami. And it's fairly connected. Like Florida pretty much stays the same, but it seems like there's, again, these concentrations of population. Piedmont Atlantic happens to be like the Appalachian area. You could go onto Facebook, robertphoenix.com, look at the map, and then you have the Great Lakes mega region, and then you have the Northeast mega region. Now these smaller little bubbles indicate potential places for population. When you look at this map, and the concentration of people is significant. It's significant. And where there is no color on the map, basically there will be no people living, or very few at the most. Very, very few. This is the vision of the future. This is the Hunger Games vision of the future. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 regions. How many regions were in the Hunger Games? Question mark. Each of the mega regions would have its own version of a senator or president. And there will be no father of our country. This is the picture. This is the diagram. This is the blueprint that is happening right now. Where did it come from? Besides the Rio Summit, which is where they signed off, and we've looked at the astrology of it. Well, it's a good question. A lot of the ideology comes out of something called the Wildlands Project. The Wildlands Project. This is a very interesting document that I discovered. By the way, if you ever want to do any really in-depth searching on the web, use DuckDuckGo, because you'll find stuff on DuckDuckGo you will never find on Google or Yahoo. You'll find some interesting articles on DuckDuckGo. And I discovered this one. It's called The Wildlands Project Unleashes Its War on Mankind. I'm going to read this to you. This is put together by a woman by the name of Marilyn Brannon. She was the associate editor in a Monetary and Economic Review in Fort Collins. The impulse to possess turf is a powerful one for all species. It is one that people must overcome. Sensitivity over the relationship between international responsibility and national sovereignty is a considerable obstacle to the leadership at the international level. Sovereignty is a principle which will yield only slowly and reluctantly to the imperatives of global environmental cooperation. This is from the report of the Commission on Global Governance, Ecologic Magazine, published Environmental Conservation Organization, Hollow Rock, Tennessee. It's January, February 1996. So they did a Rio Summit in 92. They're talking about, this is before 1998. I believe this came out in 1996. The plan is to convene a world conference on global governance in 1998, similar to the Earth Summit that was held in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. Official world governance treaties are expected to come out of that conference with the goal of worldwide implementation by the year 2000. Here's where it gets interesting. When radical environmentalist Dave Foreman first described his vision of a rewilded America in his book Confessions of an Eco-Warrior, only a few grasped the radical implications of his dreams. Others dismissed his vision as lunacy, aware that Foreman, co-founder of Earth First, had advocated tree spiking and been convicted of conspiracy to blow up power transmission lines. But today, Foreman's dream, known as the Wildlands Project, has transmuted to an Orwellian nightmare supported by innumerable UN agencies, embraced by the United Nations Environmental Program, UNESCO, the Sierra Club, the Nature Conservancy, the U.S. Department of the Interior, and the EPA. The Sierra Club recently elected Dave Foreman to its board of directors, and this is a while ago. And that organization has now embraced the Wildlands Project as its major endeavor. It is being unleashed relentlessly across America. So now into the roots of Agenda 21. It's the Wildlands Project. In this special report, we are presenting the hard copy black and white evidence of the radical environmentalist plan to regulate the politically powerless among the human race on limited areas set aside for human habitations in the decades ahead. The maps we have included are the product of hours of intensive research and scrutiny of scores of documents by Dr. Michael S. Kaufman and the staff of Environmental Perspectives Incorporated, Bangor, Maine. Data was obtained from the Biodiversity Treaty, reports prepared by the President's Council for Sustainable Development, the U.S. Man and Biosphere Program, and the Wildlands Project. Dr. Kaufman's research has produced an impressive body of valuable information on the agenda of the radical environmental movement to preserve biological diversity in the U.S. However, there are three basic benchmarks of data that the reader needs initially in order to orient himself to the whole scope of the movement. The legal framework for the plan is Article 8AE of the Convention on Biological Diversity. This is the treaty that President Clinton had already signed and that the U.S. Senate was very nearly duped into ratifying on September 1995. The conceptual framework for the plan is essentially the Wildlands Project. This is in section 10.4.2.2.3 of the United Nations Global Biodiversity Assessment, the GBA. That portion of the GBA defines the enabling and enforcement protocols for the Biodiversity Treaty, which the Green Movement still intends to push through the U.S. Senate. According to the GBA, reserves would include wilderness areas and national parks, while inner buffer zones would permit no agriculture of no more than 0.5 miles of road per square mile of land, primitive camping, and only light selection harvesting forests. The June 25, 1993 issue of Science Magazine reports the plan calls for 23.4% of the land to be put into wilderness, no human use, and 26.2% into corridors and human buffer zones. That means that 49% of the land in this country will not be usable by people like you and I. The Wildlands Project is a massive program for restructuring society around nature as the organizing principle. Hey, I love nature. Nature's great. What are they doing? They're weaponizing nature. The concept is Foreman's, but the plan is developed by Dr. Reed Noss under grants from the Nature Conservancy and the National Audubon Society. It was first published in Wild Earth, a publication of the Cenozoic Society, of which Foreman is chairman. Funded by the Ira Hitty Foundation for Deep Ecology, 75,000 copies of the plan were produced and distributed. The Wildlands Project was set up as a corporation with offices in Arizona and Oregon. Foreman is chairman of the board. Reed Moss is a director. Now remember, this is about 20 years ago. Actually, 97, yeah, it's about 20 years ago. But this is it. This is the bones of Agenda 21. So here it is. The objective of the program, conceived in 1971, has been to designate sites worldwide for preservation and to protect the biodiversity of chosen sites on a global level. Toward that end, the Sierra Club has redrawn the map of North America into 21 bioregions. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post this link on my Facebook page, Robert Phoenix. So if you're interested in really going through this and getting a lot of kind of hardcore data about the foundation of Agenda 21 and where it comes from, I'm going to have it available. Now, a lot of these people have probably moved on, but they've played their role in the great work. And the great work is to establish, essentially, the New World Order. Now, if you go back and you look at Changing Images of Man, which I talked about a month ago as we began to break down Stanford University and all the social programming that has gone through Stanford, Changing Images of Man, which was created by Dwayne Elgin and by Joseph Campbell and by I always forget the guy's name. And I always see him in my head. It'll come to me. If you look at Changing Images of Man, they basically talk about how to come back, Willis Herman, thank you, come back into this sort of pantheistic relationship with nature and fusing it with this sort of light touch New Age spirituality, and how nature and the environment becomes the rallying cause. It becomes the organizing principle. Because every society needs an organizing principle. Right? It's true. If you don't have an organizing principle, what do you have? You have anarchy, which is pretty close to where we are today. Rejection of capitalism, rejection of family, rejection of whatever is standard, the sort of the moral fabric and fiber of a time gone by, religion, it's all being rejected. That organizing principle, to some degree, is being non-consented to. Correct? Now, there's some people that still adhere to it. Some people that are, connected to it, and family and God and country. There's a lot of people out there. Don't let the media completely gloss over this, okay? Flyover states, trust me, there's a lot of people that hold these points of view to be very close to themselves and try to live them out to the best of their ability. But there's, another group that is walking away from it, rejecting it. This is why we have a fractious country. So if that's the case, and that organizing principle, when those organizing principles are going by the wayside, then there has to be some. At one time it was like, if you go back to the Middle Ages, right, and you lived in a fiefdom, what was the organizing principle? There was religion. It was the king and the queen, or the duke, or the duchess, or the earl, or the baron, the baroness, and then you had religion. The organizing principle is religion. You lived a moral, just life. You feared God. You lived by the Word of God, and you kept your nose clean. And at the end of the trip, hopefully, you'd get the e-ticket, right? I mean, that was the organizing principle. You look at the cathedrals of Europe; they were the biggest buildings. Then what happened? The organizing principle became the state, because once state or country capitals, the capital buildings of a state or a country, once they became bigger than the church, they became the organizing principle. So it was statehood or countryhood. And then after that, what was the largest building to occupy space? It was the skyscraper. So corporations and capitalism generally became the organizing principle. So we've gone through 3 variations of the organizing principle. We're coming to the end of, to some degree, capitalism. And if we're going to have a relationship with capitalism, it's got to be renewed. Anyway, that's a different show. So if those 3 main organizing principles are going away, and the derivations of those organizing principles, which we've all embodied to one degree or another over time and in our lives, then what's the next organizing principle? Atheism? I don't think so. Because I think atheism has with it a touch of nihilism. So it is a renewed and reinvested version of pantheism, that nature becomes the organizing principle. And I think nature is great. I think that we need to spend more time in nature. But we don't have to use it as an organizing principle. And certainly we can't allow it to be weaponized and used against us. Because that's what the EPA does. I mean, haven't you read stories about, they're really common stories. Like this poor dude who was just collecting rainwater in barrels in Portland, Oregon. And he got fined by the city. Said it's not his. It's not his property. They're really interested. Like, there was this one story about this family who, it was a woman. She spent a ton of time and energy and money. You can find this video on YouTube. I'd like to talk to her. And she converted her house into being totally self-sufficient. And it was inside of a city. Totally self-sufficient. She had her own power. She had her own water. She had it all. It was all compliant with city code and everything. Guess what? She was forced to leave her home. Forced to leave her home. And it wasn't the city that forced her to leave her home. It was some international organization. I wish I had that video right now. I'd play it for you. Forced to leave her home. You see, she took the message and she personalized it. She said, great. I will live with my own version of this. I'll create my own version. And I'll get people to sign off on it. She had initiative. You see, that's the American way. Am I right? To me, that is the American way. I'll work with the system. I'll go through all the various steps that I need to. And I will contribute and I'll get back to this community by having a lighter footprint. But I'll do it myself. And she gets all the benefits from it. She gets basically free energy, selling back to the city, free water, all these different things. That's somebody we should congratulate. Because she had the initiative and the resources and ultimately the know-how to put it all together. We should be celebrating this woman, but instead she gets kicked out. Now, I don't know if she was able to go back in or not, and it was an international body. You see, we aren't allowed to do it. This is the downside of Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. It's all good if they do it, but if we do it, we're violating some kind of international treaty, which is true based upon this woman's experience. So here we are, and we're trying to wrap our heads around this a little bit more. I think it's really important because it is happening. It is in slow creep mode. It is happening. They're building the walls on these freeways to be 15, 20 feet high. Why do you think that is? Because the freeways will become corridors, and you won't be allowed to get off the freeways unless there's an exit, and you'll go to an area where there's kind of a designated area that's like a turnaround, a rotary. They'll have shops, they'll have food, they'll have gas, charging stations, whatever. And then you get back on the freeway, and it's more corridors. I mean, who knows what the hell will be going on in the wilded sections of these 21 bioregions. That Mars at 29 degrees is interesting inside of the Rio Summit chart, because Uranus is going to cross that Mars at some point in the not so distant future. In fact, it'll cross it at the beginning of in fact, it's kind of right there right now, but it crosses at the beginning of 2018, goes into Taurus, and it comes back again for one more dance. I wonder if people will wake up during that time with that Uranus-Mars conjunction. Well, there it is, boys and girls. There's your Agenda 2021, Agenda 2030 breakdown from the astrological perspective of the Rio Summit to some of the pieces behind it. There's a lot going on out there. So I advise you, if you want to wake up to the real story, if you want to wake up to the real social agenda, that's where it is. Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, and the social creep, the social and environmental creep. And again, there are things that are worthwhile about the environment. Let's be clear about that. Worthwhile. We don't want to shit on our environment because we've done a lot of that. But at the same time, it shouldn't be used against us in order to further some globalist agenda. It's just the way it is. And even when we decide that we want to participate on our own and create our own solutions, well, that's not tolerated either. So we understand and know what the real game is here, right? And it'll be interesting to see what happens with Trump as he, in his own way, is disassembling this relationship with Agenda 2030. Certainly, he went a long ways by defunding those three organizations, those three NGOs that were basically fronting for those bioregions that I was talking about. That guy's got he's got crosshairs. He's in the crosshairs. And, it's just, I wish he could be more articulate. But the people love him. And, there are a lot of people that love Trump because he is not articulate. He sounds gruff and monosyllabic, and he's not the easiest person to listen to. But it'll be interesting to see what happens on the sort of the back end of this G20 thing. All right, that's it for today. There's your 1 hour and 20 minutes of the Friday FARcast over on my website, robertphoenix.com. I have a new program that I've offered to people. Venus went into Gemini at 0 degrees, so I decided to put it on my website. And it is a really good program for relationships. Relationship dynamics is fantastic. And then the sort of the whole picture reading, which is basically what we have here, is we have synastry readings, midpoint composites, which is the couple as two individuals working things out and creating and co-creating, and then the couple as one. If you're in a relationship, if you're going to get in a relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship or a working relationship, I highly recommend these reports. And I've got a really nice deal going on my website. You can go over there and check that out, robertphoenix.com. And, of course, I've got my astrology course, which people have been picking up on and purchasing and working with. So if you're interested in kind of how I break things down, like I just did with the Rio Summit chart, you can find a lot of that information on my course. And that's available through robertphoenix.com as well. All right, so why don't we wrap it up here? Enjoy the Capricorn full moon. I don't know how you enjoy that. Go climb a rock somewhere. Go climb a mountain, a small mountain, maybe under the full moon. That'll be the way to enjoy it. Let's see if we got anybody in the chat room. Hey, we got one chatter. Nothing wrong being diverse. There's nothing wrong being diverse. No, nothing wrong being diverse. Yes. Amen. All right. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to separate what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. I'll see you guys on Sunday night with the Sunday night live stream.
Think about you all